I thought that, we had a few questions about Colorado State University as we've been meeting in the hallways. Isn't one of the great things about conferences the hallway conversations that you have? And having a long lunch lets you have even more of those conversations. Having great conversations. Had some folks ask me about some numbers that they wanted to hear about. This seems like the right crowd to talk about when it comes to numbers. So 30,200, the number of students at Colorado State University this year. We really didn't lose many students during the pandemic. We pivoted online for a brief time and then got everybody back face to face. And all of our students did a great job in that process, taking care of each other as part of that. Land-Grant University, 1870 was our founding, 1862 being the Morrill Act, 1870. So we're sitting in our 152nd year here at Colorado State University. Back then, we were the Colorado Agricultural College. And there was just, if you've seen that iconic oval, there was just one building on the campus, the Old Main, which burned down in the 1970s. During the Vietnam War protests was our first big main building that was there. You might see the A up there, and some folks ask me, what does that A stand for? What do you suppose that stands for? Yeah, we were Colorado A&M for quite a while. And it used to be the tradition was that all of the first-year students would carry rocks up the side of the hill, and they would plant those on that A as part of what they did as first-year students. That was one of the things that you did up that. Over time, we got a little smarter. We decided to paint it on an annual basis. So every year, right before the first home football game, we have a chance for students and alumni to get together and go up and paint that A. And we do it all in about 8 hours to get that taken care of. So that's what that A is for us, too. 150. This is a good one to get a pen out for. 150. So here at CSU, we have, would you believe, a fermentation science program. And as you might guess, fermentation science, very popular major at Colorado State University. The first a month after we initiated that major, we had 150 students that signed up right away. So down in the basement of this building, you may have noticed the Ramskeller, which is our own little facility down there. We brew our own beer down there, and the members of the fermentation science program are in charge of that. I say that because that's one of the things that Fort Collins is known for, is innovation, attention to detail, quality, and that shows up in craft brewing. In fact, this is why I had you take your pens out. In fact, our reception this evening, 5 o'clock, we're going to be at New Belgium Brewery. For those of you who've had a fat tire before, that's where they first started to brew that. A great part of the legacy of Fort Collins. New Belgium Brewing is where we'll be at. The address for that is 500 Linden Street. It's about 1.5 miles from here. So you can access that with a car. There's parking. They'll be around out there. Hey, we're shutting the place down today so that you'll have run of the facility while you're there. So when you come in, it'll look like it's deserted. It's not that it's deserted. We're just waiting for you to come in. So if you go in on the west side, you'll see a large patio area just a little bit north of that. And north would be that direction because the mountains are on your left when you're on this part of Colorado. North would be that direction. That's where the entrance is for you to come in. And we'll have some beverages for you, some food for that reception, give you a chance to get to know New Belgium Brewing and what that's all about here in Fort Collins, Colorado. So with that, I can't think of a better pivot, Kate Greenberg, to talk a little bit about what we're going to do in our panels this session. We've got a set of panels that are really going to sort of illustrate some of the key concepts we talked about this morning. And one of those panels is going to be moderated by our Commissioner of Agriculture here in Colorado, Kate Greenberg. Kate was appointed as the Colorado's Commissioner of Agriculture by Governor Jared Polis in December of 2018. Kate and I were just talking a little bit. It feels like an eye blink sometimes, doesn't it, to serve in that role? And part of the reason why is, and one thing that's true probably for the Commissioners of Agriculture in your states, that Commissioners of Agriculture seem to address things that come to us in biblical sorts of ways. You've heard of the plagues before, right, as they come back down. Commissioner Greenberg, before long, here in Colorado, had dealt with drought and with fire and with blizzards that had taken place, and invasive species, insect species and plant species that had come along, and handling all of those with tremendous leadership and a very even-keeled, a very thoughtful approach to help promote Colorado agriculture. At the same time, all those biblical things were raining down. Kate Greenberg was very much about helping make healthy soils in Colorado and telling that story across the United States. Also having an opportunity to do a little bit about what we're talking about. Well, maybe a lot of it, actually. Promoting young and beginning and small farms. And Kate's leadership has really been fundamental in changing the way we think about agriculture and what the future will look like in Colorado and especially in the semi-arid West. So with that in mind, it's my pleasure to introduce to you, and I'll ask the Commissioner to join us, Commissioner Kate Greenberg.
Wow, what a welcome. Thank you so much, Dean Pritchett. Can't say enough about this gentleman who's exiting the stage and what an excellent partner he is personally as commissioner for our State Department of Ag and for our state as a whole. So we are very lucky to have you, Dean Pritchett, in your role here at CSU. Welcome to Colorado, first and foremost. I'm very glad you're joining us here in our beautiful state. You may have been here during the recent snowstorm on Monday, which we are always grateful for. If not, you have a beautiful sunny day, and that's something that we also cherish here across our state. I have just a few minutes of slideshow before I start our panel, which is really going to be the highlight of today. But I want to just share with you what we're doing here at the Department of Ag and maybe kind of touch on some of the things we'll be talking about with our panel. And I just want to make sure with the slides, are we ready to go on the slide deck? Good to go? Okay. And I think I got the clicker here, so let's see. Oh, so here we go. So just by way of background, this is a slide talking about our mission. And, a lot of times Colorado, or departments of ag, we're regulators, right? We inspect facilities and ag operations, but we're really here to advance Colorado agriculture. And that's something we take very seriously in our department. We got folks who care deeply about ag, who are part of the ag community, and whether we're in a regulatory program or a marketing program advancing ag, all of us are here to advance the mission and adapt for the future. We also, of course, help protect safe and healthy food supplies and protect consumers. That's a big part of what we do. And we also help ensure good stewardship of the natural world. So when you take kind of all three of these clauses of our mission, this is what filters into the work we do every single day. And in fact, you can see this work reflected in our big goals. So our 300 staff all across the state, 8 divisions, every day are working toward moving these goals forward. The first one, economic and supply chain resilience. This is something we've been thinking about for a long time. The pandemic has put it in new light. How do we help the bottom line for our farmers and ranchers in Colorado? Nearly 39,000 farms and ranches. Of course, many more people than that who are involved. And the question of how do you get young people in, or how do you keep young people in the business, all comes back to this. How do you make a living for yourself and your family? So on this front, we're thinking about, how do we help diversify markets and market access for our producers here? So that comes down to processing, for example. We've put a lot of money into helping support our small and mid-scale processors so our producers have more options and can access more markets, especially those higher premium direct-to-consumer markets. We're also thinking about value added. That's something we'll probably talk about with our panel. How can we support our producers who are looking to diversify and add value to the products they grow and raise to actually meet that consumer demand and tell the story while building that bottom line? Second is advancing voluntary stewardship. A big focus of ours here. Believes strongly that farmers and ranchers are leaders in conservation, that agriculture has a primary role to play in advancing our big goals and our big challenges here in Colorado and across the country, especially when it comes to soil, water, and climate. That's really how we think of it. Out here, we have drought, and we talk about drought, but really, we are in an arid environment with increasingly hot and increasingly dry times. So how do we grow and raise food, knowing that that's part of our future? So some of what we've done in the last couple of years, as Dean Pritchett mentioned, we launched just within the department a soil health program. We've got folks who will talk about that here in a few minutes. It's called STAR, Saving Tomorrow's Agricultural Resources. Actually, a conservation district in Illinois incubated the thought, so if any of you are from that state, thank your conservation district for us. But we've taken that, expanded it. We're working with 17 of our conservation districts on a pilot. The idea is we are providing grants, technical assistance, and research for producers to do what they do and drive soil health forward. We're also drawing in companies, supply chain partners who can help be part of this ecosystem we're building and show that there is a premium, that there's a marketplace for this work of stewardship. And then lastly, of course, while we're all here today, our third big goal is supporting the next generation of farmers and ranchers. And actually, we've expanded that to ag leaders, because really we want anybody who is interested in the art, the science, the business of agriculture to have a place. And whether you're starting from scratch and don't have any ties to agriculture, or maybe you're third or fourth or 12th generation agriculture and you want to find a way to stay in, we want to help. So we're thinking about everything from K-12 all the way up to the first 10 years of production, how we help that sort of entry point for folks, and then on the succession planning side as well. So on the earlier side of education, middle and high schoolers, we're actually created a STEM program with our labs just down the highway in Broomfield. So we're bringing kids out to learn from our scientists in our biochem lab, in our metrology lab, in our animal health lab who want to be a part of that. We've also got a paid apprenticeship program, so we pay ag businesses to hire interns so they can get a season's worth of experience out on the farm. And then lastly, and this is something I'm very excited to connect with you all on. Last year, we were able to pass 5 bills through our legislature, a total of $76 million for ag recovery dollars for COVID. And one of the programs that we created is a $30 million revolving loan fund. So that fund is going to be able to finance both small and mid-scale processors and beginning and underserved farmers and ranchers. So we're building that now. We are excited to be a partner, not a competitor, but we're able to take on more risk. The statute really is pretty wide open for us to be creative. And so when speaking with Administrator Ducheneau earlier, who is just an absolute thought leader in this regards, we're going to learn a lot from you on how we build this program, and I think many of you here. We want to be really creative and push the edge of creative financing here in Colorado and think about how we could scale that to meet the needs of beginning and underserved farmers and ranchers. So I mentioned here agricultural stimulus funds. This has been a huge focus of ours. Our total funding in $76 million has gone out to support local county fairs, our state fair, National Western Stock Show. We're supporting drought resilience and drought relief. We're building our soil health program, renewable energy work. We're focusing a lot on agrivoltaics, microhydro, methane recapture, and utility savings. We've actually helped save about $370,000 in utility bills for producers just in the last few months alone. We're also very focused on ag marketing and promotion, telling the story, selling our products, supporting our businesses across food and ag. So that's sort of a snapshot of the Colorado Department of Agriculture, but we do not do what we do alone. We do it with our producers. We do it with our Ag Commission, governor-appointed boards. We do it with our communities across the state in all 64 counties to make sure we're hitting the mark and heading in the right direction. So with that, I am honored today to have a panel of 4 incredible folks who are going to share their perspective on young, beginning, and small farmers and how that relates to some of the things I've talked about, especially from their vantage points out in the field. So what we're going to do, we're going to have each 4 folks I'm going to introduce individually, and one at a time, and they'll come up and give you a presentation, and then the next one will come up and give their presentation. We'll move through that and then have our panel discussion to follow. So without further ado, I would like to introduce first Bob Madsen. So Bob is Vice President and Team Leader of the Mission Financing Division at Compeer Financial in Mankato. And Bob, you don't know this yet, but I was actually raised in Mankato, Minnesota, for the first part of my life, so we'll have to catch up on that. His team finances essential community facilities across the U.S., mainly consisting of rural hospitals, senior care facilities, and other facilities that provide overall benefit to rural communities. And since this program's inception, Bob's team has financed over 100 projects nationwide with over $1 billion in total financing, most of these projects involving public-private partnerships with state, federal, local government units, as well as local banks and other FCS entities. And the work completed by his team has gained national recognition from the White House, USDA Rural Development, and many other agencies and institutions, all with the goal of making rural America a better place to live and keeping agriculture strong for the future. With that, help me welcome Bob Madsen to the stage.
All right. Well, great. Thank you. And, we've had a good meeting and presentation so far, very focused on the agricultural infrastructure kind of arena. And my other panelists will continue to present on that. But I'm going to take a little bit of a different spin. Because long term, for agriculture to be successful, rural communities need to be successful, and vice versa. And so what we've done at Compeer and through the abilities provided by the Farm Credit Administration is make investments in areas outside of agriculture that's really focused on a mission of supporting rural America, specifically farmers and ranchers. And that really ties back into trying to bring younger generations, young and beginning farmers and ranchers back to rural America, as well as helping to retain those, so whether they leave or don't leave. And so just kind of thinking about the demands of infrastructure in rural America in general, in some ways they really change based on where you're at in life and maybe your status as far as full-time or part-time farmer. The longer that you're gone from rural America, the more it takes to get you back and to keep you. I think that's fair to say. And when others are involved in the decision, other than just yourself, there are also more demands. So thinking back to an early song from the 1990s, sometimes love just ain't enough to get people to come back, especially when you have a significant other or spouse. And again, as you're thinking about being a full-time farmer or part-time farmer, graduating or moving up into that full-time arena, you need other opportunities. As Administrator Ducheneau mentioned, 89% of farmers need some sort of off-farm income to subsidize their operation or possibly their family living costs. So as we think about kind of the strategies and the needs, for those that have no intention of leaving rural America, it's more of a retention strategy. And you could probably say the same thing for those that go on to higher education for a 2-year, 4-year degree, but already have the plan to come back. It's more about retention than bringing back. But many people, and I think Board Chair Smith mentioned maybe his family situation once upon a time on a tour that I was on, recommending that people go away from rural America, leave, get their education, get some life experience and employment, gain some experience before coming back. That's really where it's more of an attraction that's needed. And so as people are thinking about building their communities, because rural development and economic development really is a team sport. It takes partnerships, it takes multiple groups, and nobody can solve it on their own. Is having those, really core infrastructure needs, as well as amenities that we won't hit on here, but core infrastructure needs to get people to come back, to begin farming, ranching, and actually want to stay. So hitting on some key infrastructure needs. Medical facilities is one of the top. It doesn't matter whether you're young, old, you need to have modern medical facilities, hospitals, clinics, specialty care in order to make your rural community vibrant and also attract people back and keep them in rural America. Obviously, emergency care, things of that nature are extremely important. But one overlooked aspect of not having those medical facilities in your community is from an employment perspective, a hospital is usually one of the major employers in your community. And as we're thinking about off-farm income, bringing back spouses and families, being able to deliver babies if that's in the plan for the future, having these modern facilities is important. And we've seen it time and time again how a replacement or modernized hospital can change a rural community and really change the outlook of its citizens. A second highly or just key aspect is having broadband and high-speed internet. And I think that's only going to become more important. I mean, it's not just because of personal use. Everybody's got their smartphones, doesn't know what to do without them. People are moving away from cable TV, and it's all about streaming. So you need it not only from a personal satisfaction perspective, but also from education. We've seen that through the pandemic, having to do your learning from home when you have a family. You need to have that high-speed internet, not just for your children, but for yourself, whether that's higher education or just educating yourself to keep up with business needs. But one big one that I think we're going to continue to see, and we talked about it at lunch a little bit with one of my panelists, was the fact that the workplace environment has changed and I think it's here to stay. Don't quote me on that, but flexibility in your job and where you work from is really a demand that many people can put onto an employer these days. Not every job, of course, but I think you're going to see opportunities for people to relocate back to rural America if that's where they want to be, and still maintain very high-paying jobs that come with great benefits that were in a metro area before. It's going to give more and more opportunities for those who want to be involved in agriculture to come back with a spouse or significant other and family. And making sure that we have that is key. The other thing is for those, especially who are thinking about having a family or have a family, is a strong educational system. And modern educational facilities don't necessarily equate to strong, but a lot of times it sure helps the perception. It helps with recruiting of teachers, staff, and just people feeling good about their school system. And again, going back to the employment area, hospitals and schools are typically the largest employers in these rural communities and provides a great source of opportunity for off-farm income. Let's see. Public safety. I think sometimes we overlook those things, but making sure that we have fire and rescue, ambulance services, law enforcement, making sure that our communities are deemed safe, and that if something does happen, that the infrastructure is there to take care of yourself and your family. I know we definitely overlook utilities. We don't think about that a lot. It's kind of a given that everybody wants electricity and clean water and that type of thing. But that's obviously very important to have as we think about attracting people back and retaining. And another big one that probably isn't thought about a lot is senior care facilities. As we're talking about bringing people back to rural America to take over farms and ranches, we have an older generation that has to go somewhere, right? They can't stay on the farm forever. If you're a full-time farmer and you're very busy, you're not able to take care of that generation. So making sure that there's modern and safe facilities for whether it be parents or grandparents is extremely important. And if you are making a life change to move somewhere and plan to stay there the rest of your life, I think most people should be thinking about themselves for the future as well. And again, senior care facilities are another very important source of employment for people in rural America. Housing is one that can be overlooked. A lot of times when people move back to rural America, they may have a housing lined up if it's on the farm, but if you don't, you obviously need a place to live. So making sure that you have good housing for yourself. But another area that I am seeing over and over as an area need is workforce housing. So as people want to expand their businesses, whether it's value-added processing, you name it, it's always great if you can find the workers that you need who live in the area and have housing lined up. But for those that don't, where you need to attract new members to that community for your business, where are they going to live? Kind of a personal, not personal situation, but in the town where I live, Mankato, a hotel went out of business, and one gentleman who's involved in agriculture and was part owner of a hog processing facility needed to bring in a bunch of workers. This processing facility is an hour away. He bought the hotel, and that's where people are living, and he's busing them back and forth because that rural town of 4,000 people where the processing facility is at didn't have the housing, and they could not come to an agreement on building multifamily housing to house these new workers. And so how do you start a business or expand if your workers don't have a place to live? And again, the agricultural infrastructure piece, which we're going to hit on here more with the other panelists. So thinking just a little bit about the Farm Credit System investment. So Compeer is a Farm Credit System entity. And just from talking with FCA, I think it's important that the room here knows that in general, the Farm Credit System does not have direct lending authorities for most of these infrastructure areas that I talked about. The exception would be CoBank has authorities within water and sewer and rural telecommunications and some of those areas. But specifically as it relates to kind of the healthcare, senior care, public safety aspect, education, system does not have direct lending authorities. However, the FCA board does have the ability to grant some individual case-by-case approvals And that process has been in place since 2015. Prior to that, there was a pilot program that was a little more broad from kind of the 2006 to 2014 range. And that's where, for some members of the Farm Credit System, it made some investments in this rural infrastructure and in communities to help support farmers and ranchers with a focus on the young beginning piece. And just a little bit of background of some of the investments that we've made. We've been a part of roughly 25 to 30 senior care facilities and 25 to 30 hospitals kind of over my tenure. I've been doing the rural infrastructure investments pretty much exclusively since the 2009. So most of my career has been focused on that. And it's really about, as I mentioned, rural development being a team sport. So we partner with USDA, rural development, and their financing programs, local banks, local farm credit system entities, to pull together financing packages to make these investments and make projects happen. Politically, sometimes banks and farm credit don't get along, but I can tell you when it comes to Main Street and doing a project in a rural community, those politics go out the window. We'll leave that to other communities. Let's just get it done and make sure that it happens. And I can tell you that there is a great need out there for investment infrastructure in rural America. With the cost of projects and construction going up these days, and the fact that most schools and senior care and hospitals were built in the 1950s and 60s, we've hit a spot where there's a lot of need for replacement and expansion. And again, from our panel today, I was talking with another Farm Credit System employee in Kansas about a project in her community that we had looked at possibly being involved with. And so the needs are out there. And we're looking to help fill that in any way possible within the constraints allowed by FCA, and looking forward to partnering with whoever it takes to pull these together. So with that, I will turn it over to the next, get Kate back up here and we'll sit down and. Okay.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Bob. Let's give a round of applause for Bob. All right, our next speaker this afternoon is Kevin Jablonski. Kevin is the president of the board of directors of the Poudre Valley Community Farms. He served in that role since 2018 and is also an extension faculty member in the Department of Animal Sciences here at CSU, studying the ecology of grazing livestock. Kevin has worked as a grant manager, livestock producer, and a conservation biologist, and he earned his PhD in rangeland ecosystem science from CSU in 2019. He lives in the foothills with his wife Becca and daughters, is it Lila, thank you, and Francis. And on the side, he operates a small multi-species livestock business. Please help me welcome Kevin Jablonski to the stage.
Thank you, Commissioner Greenberg. Hi. Too far. So I'm just going to take a few minutes here, but I think my contribution to this panel is to, A, give a bit of local flavor, something going on here in the Fort Collins, Northern Colorado area. Part of it is an innovative model, I think, for connecting farmers to farmland, especially in an area where access is challenging. I think a second sort of part of it is a growing public-private partnership between the city of Fort Collins and Poudre Valley Community Farms. And actually, it's really a three-way partnership between farmers, a community-based organization, and a municipality, city of Fort Collins. And then lastly, I can briefly describe some infrastructure sort of challenges and lessons learned. And I hope ultimately it's a relatively small project, but it's sort of instructive and perhaps inspiring, the approach we've taken. And so, yeah, the name of our organization is Poudre Valley Community Farms. And so looking at our region, and these graphs and these trends are ever present, and you know, I've done a lot of work in rural areas. Rural communities is sort of a passion of mine. But this is a rapidly growing urban and suburban area. But nevertheless, I think a lot of these lessons do transfer. On the top right, we have real estate prices, and then on the bottom right, we have water prices. If you're from an area where water falls from the sky, where I have raised livestock before, no, we got to pay for it here, and it costs a lot because you have to compete with people who want to drink it and water their lawns with it. And so the challenges we face here are land and water are expensive and scarce, increasingly scarce. Prices are decoupled from the agricultural realities, right? If you're a farmer and you want to buy land in our region, you're going to compete with a developer who wants to put a home every quarter acre on that property. You can't pay for land at that price, right? You can't pay for the land like a developer can pay for land if they're going to put houses on it. And so a question that's really been confronting our community for a decade really rapidly, you can see on these graphs, but 30 years or more here, is how can we keep farmers in our community? How can we prevent them from being pushed increasingly to the margins, driving an hour to market their product if they're marketing locally? And so the question that some really smart folks, some of whom are in the room, asked about 6 years ago, and really probably about 8 years ago, the question was asked, is what if the community owned the land and the water here? So that's Poudre Valley Community Farms. It was launched in 2016. It's a multi-stakeholder cooperative. It's a cooperative. It's not a nonprofit. It's technically a for-profit model, although you'd be hard-pressed to find the profits in it. We have greater than 110 local members currently, local community members, who have purchased shares in the cooperative. Shares start at $2,500. It's not cheap for most people. And so that many people have signed up, some for significantly more as investment share members, to join the cooperative and provide us with startup funds, essentially. The services the cooperative provides to local community members, to farmers in our community, are long-term affordable leases. We take land that is going to be either developed or otherwise inaccessible to farmers, make it accessible to them at market competitive rates, agriculturally marketed competitive rates, not development marketed competitive rates. We provide infrastructure development support. Very often what we're looking at are hay fields that are going to be doing more diverse vegetables. We have an elderberry producer. We have livestock, small-scale livestock producers. We also provide connection to investors. We've facilitated a fair amount of investment in our farmers that participate in our cooperative via not our own funds, but via investors who say, I'll provide you funds at a very low interest rate because I appreciate what you're doing and I want to support our community. Business and grant support, and also networking for our producers. And ultimately, our mission as Poudre Valley Community Farms is to ensure affordable, with an emphasis on affordable, access to farmland in our community. Again, in our community, in an area that's rapidly developing. How can we keep farmers as members of our community? People you see every day at the daycare, at the schools, at church, people that are part of your community. And so, again, quick presentation, but our lessons learned and current status. So currently, we have 4 properties in the area, the city of Fort Collins, growing actually quite rapidly in recent years, with a lot of things in the pipeline. Has 9 farmers, including young and beginning. On one of our properties, we are just starting a farm business accelerator program to target young and beginning farmers. This is in collaboration with a local nonprofit. So our original model as Poudre Valley Community Farms is we're going to buy land. We're going to compete with those developers. We're going to buy the properties they would otherwise buy and keep them in ag. So our first property was a 74-acre property, actually originally a 110-acre property with water rights, good water rights. And we spent $1.3 million to purchase it. We ended up being able to pay for that property through a conservation easement, through subdivision and selling off a small house and 35 acres attached to the property, and additional fundraising. And so that's a model that can work here in this community, but something that came along in the process of sort of reaching for that purchasing model was the city of Fort Collins said, hey, we own 30,000 acres of land. They have a very good budget for purchasing and conserving land. They said, we own 30,000 acres of land, much of which is in hayfields. We'd love to see that in something more diverse, more community-oriented, more education-oriented. And so we have this growing partnership with the city of Fort Collins, 3 current irrigated leases totaling 235 acres, where we are essentially the middle person, right? The city has land, they want farmers on it. City is not well built to put farmers on land, manage those relationships, ensure they have what they need, build out the infrastructure they may need, or support them in infrastructure development. And so Poudre Valley Community Farms is serving as that middle entity in that relationship. We also are just moving forward on a grazing collaboration where the city says we have a lot of other land that needs grazing. If any of you are from Colorado, the Marshall Fire just burned south near Boulder, burned a lot of land that, in my opinion, as a grazing ecologist, needed grazing on it and needed some of that fuel removal. The city of Fort Collins recognizes that. They want grazing on their lands, but same challenge. How do we find it? How do we steward those relationships? So they are now committing 4,000 acres of their grasslands to some grazing in partnership with us, where we can not only have grazing and have viability for agricultural producers, but serve as a demonstration to the community of the appropriateness of livestock production here. And lastly, we have a 40-acre property on the largest development in the history of northern Colorado. Is going in. It's the Montava development. It's going to be an ag center development with a 40-acre farm at the middle. Again, as a community entity, we're holding the developer's feet to the fire to say, don't wait till the end and give us the 40 acres of marginal land with no water. Give us the 40 acres that the farmer wants right now in the middle of the property with adequate water rights, and that's what they're doing. They've stepped up to the table. So we're going to have a 40-acre farm in the middle of a 3,500 home development going in Fort Collins. And we have a good property pipeline. And just quickly then, funds, we've done fairly well, I think, financially. Ultimate conclusion is that we can stay in the black on the community owning or leasing the land. Taking rental payments from the producers, it puts us in the black, but there's some important lessons there. One, ownership does work. We can in Colorado, especially with the new conservation easement valuation in Colorado now is 90% of assessed value you can get as a return as a conservation easement, a tax credit. That actually really works for purchasing and turning properties around and keeping them in ag. But leasing is better. If you have a municipality with all that land and they're willing to lease it over the long term, it's a better option. But the challenge of working with the municipality, public-private partnership, is that their hands are tied in leasing. Their hands are tied in the lengths of their lease and the capacities of their lease to do different things on the properties they own because they're not used to doing things like this. And so that's a challenge. The security of the lease and the flexibility of the lease is a challenge in a public-private partnership like that. As an organization, we need more scale to up the revenue to get further into the black. We're in the black, but we're not enough in the black to support permanent staffing. And lastly, infrastructure is a really important lesson we've learned. Every single property we've gone on to has needed at least $50,000 of infrastructure investment to get it up to something that could be leasable to a producer. Right? We're not talking about things that producers should do themselves. We're talking about to be viable as agricultural land, it needed infrastructure development. City wasn't going to do it. The farmers would have been reluctant to pay to lease the land if it didn't have it. We needed a third party to come in and fund that infrastructure development, irrigation ponds, fencing, all sorts of things that might have been needed, running electrical lines, running three-phase power. These things were needed on these properties to make them agriculturally viable. That's where this third party, this community-based organization was able to step in. And I think I'll leave it there and for the next panelist. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Kevin. So I'm gonna do a quick time check. It's 2:07. I was given the green light. We can go to 2:30, which is taking up your break. So if you do need to get up to get coffee or water, use the bathroom, please, we won't be offended. But we do have two other panelists who are gonna come up and talk. And panelists, Roberto and Roy, I would challenge you to condensing this time so I can ask you the first questions as part of our panel. So next up, Roy Falzgraf. Roy farms south of Haxton up in northeast Colorado with his wife Barb and his parents. When Roy returned to the farm in 2017, it was a very traditional dry land operation, but within months of coming back, Roy has made some incredible changes, diversifying the farm, moving into value added, and is a huge leader on our soil health program. So with that, please help me welcome Roy Falzgraf to the stage.
Okay, I have to remember what's in my slides because I made them last week and I got a lot going on. Like Commissioner Greenberg said, I'm Roy Falzgraf from Haxton, Colorado. We're 2.5 hours straight east of here. We have 2,000 acres of dry land. Average precipitation in our area is 16 inches a year, and this last year we had 22 inches. It started with 9 inches on the 28th of April and finished by the 15th of June, and then it didn't rain the rest of the year. So we have a very challenging environment. We'll see 100-degree heat with 40-mile-an-hour winds, and during the winter we'll see 20 below. So this is the farm 5 years ago. This is the farm today. So you might notice there's a few changes. Now, with this is the evolution of our farm, and this is the challenge that I think that a lot of people face is, people coming back to the farm. And, I had a conversation with somebody this last week that they were like, oh, you have 2,000 acres. Well, how long's your family been on it? And I said, well, my grandfather bought it in '49. And they said, oh, so you have land access, it's easy. Yeah, I inherited $1 million of debt. So, it's one of those, yes, I have land, but I have the equivalent amount of debt that goes right along with it, even though it's not directly tied. Then, we were traditional. We've been no-till since '99, but Dad would raise wheat and then a spring crop, either corn, milo, sunflowers, or millet, and then be fallow for a year. With what we see in soil health, we have to continue to feed the soil. And with some research out in Nebraska, they showed that we actually, in our area, you can't conserve moisture from year to year. So what you farm in a single year is what you get. And so if you take a year off, it either evaporates or percolates. So it's these transitions, these changes. And with this year we're going to be raising 14 different crops. A lot of them, believe it or not, are commodity crops. There are some specialty crops. But the reason I chose some of these crops is to regenerate the land. We do feel that we are regenerative. We are not organic. We are conventional. But we've reduced our fertilizer and herbicide usage by close to 75%, which those two are our largest two inputs. With that, we actually are using same yields with less fertilizer because we are rotating the crops in a way that creates this natural fertility. And so with that, we've started to get into specialty and direct marketing. Wheat, corn, sunflowers, milo, millet, all those generally go to the elevator. Our millet, our buckwheat, and part of our oats and corn actually goes to a gluten-free malting facility where it's malted and sent to 60 or 80 breweries in the United States and in 8 countries to brew gluten-free beer, and it tastes like beer. I mean, it's kind of surprising what they can do. But that's a specialty market, and that's one of the challenges that we faced in this evolution is working with our lender. You harvest the crop in July, you have the income in August. It's one of those, that's that expectation. And it's completely different when you harvest the crop in July and then you deliver a semi-load a month for the next 9 months. So it changes a lot of this thinking and before lunch they talked about the crazier idea, the better. No, the crazier idea, the harder it is to prove that it's going to work, even if you have that background to show that it's going to. We talk about insurance. RMA actually told us this last year that buckwheat will not grow in Northeast Colorado. It's one of our highest profitable crops because we're going into the food market with it. We also sell direct to consumer. It's one of those things that started taking off. We haven't advertised it. We actually did it as an outreach for education to talk about what goes on farms. We have bees, so we sell honey. We have honeycomb. My wife makes beauty products with the wax. We have a line of gluten-free mixes that are made with millet. So we have this very diverse marketing, and it's starting to take off without even really trying. It's been kind of bizarre. I actually ordered $8,000 in food processing equipment last week, something that I would have never anticipated farming. So the connections that have been really important for our evolution, and this picture here is actually 2 weeks ago we entered a new indoor farmers market, and this is our display. We have soaps, lotion bars. The lip balms are on a separate place because they didn't have enough room for us. Our 5 gluten-free mixes, honey, and then honeycomb below. All of these contain at least one ingredient from our farm. But to make these kind of connections, it takes work, and it's not something that happens naturally. If it did, we would never have to have conversations about local food. But farmers are creatures of habit, and we're have to forced to look elsewhere. And I'm lucky because I'm working with my father. He fought with his father-in-law for 40 years while he farmed, trying to evolve the farm. So when I came back, he said, whatever you want to do, as long as you can show that it's a chance of being profitable, we'll do it. And Initially, he was resistant, but he kept to his word. And I knew that things had changed when I went to a meeting and I came home and he goes, okay, what'd you learn at this meeting? What are we going to do different? And I said, we're going to raise upland rice. And he said, okay, where's your market? That was his response. A dryland farmer in Northeast Colorado looks at raising rice as no big deal. You know, that is the evolution of that thought process. Colorado Grain Chain, I was on the board when it was founded. It's actually a group that is a public-private partnership that works on connecting specialty farms, specialty grains to processors. And it's interesting to see how it evolved. And the thing is it was happening and starting to evolve when COVID happened. And it was really good because these farmers that have their own mills could deliver flour when you couldn't go to the grocery store and get flour. So it's starting to change that consumer mindset, and it's making those connections that maybe we need to know our farmers and maybe we need to talk to them about buying our food instead of relying on the grocery store. I was also a founding member of the High Plains Beekeepers. We keep bees, but it's one of those, it's a really good way to, you know, there's a lot of connections in agriculture with bees. So once again, it was CSU Extension with a local group. Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, a lot of stuff what I did, that I've done, has been through connections that I've made through Farmers Union. So we have to encourage farmers to get out and talk with other farmers and talk with other people that innovate. The Farms Project, like Kate had mentioned, oh no, that's STAR, sorry. Farms is an NRCS CIG loan or grant program that I'm part of. They're looking at what producers are doing that is evolutionary and changing how the farms are doing. So once again, that's Colorado Conservation Tillage combined with NRCS to bring out grant money to fund. We were raising camelina on a field this year that is part of that project. And then the STAR program is focusing on soil health. My biggest thing is when they started bringing this out, we don't need government money to fund soil health programs. We need the market to do it. We need to be able to create a program that incentivizes marketing so the consumer can go to the grocery store and vote with their dollar versus having to pay taxes that's redistributed to farms. And so with that, there's the pieces are there that we're working on evolving and growing to get that so there will be more opportunities in direct to farm. So, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Roy. All right, last but not least is Roberto Mesa. Roberto is a first-generation farmer, artist, local food advocate, originally from Mexico. Roberto now calls Bennett, Colorado, the home of his farm operation and greenhouse. He's also the CEO of the East Denver Food Hub, which is a local food supplier based in Denver. And his work lies at the intersection of policy, sustainable ag, food systems, and environmental stewardship. He is also a member of the Denver Sustainable Food Policy Council, president of the National Young Farmers Coalition, my former employer, and co-chair of the Land Access Committee for Mile High Farmers. He is a governor appointee to my board, so he is one of my bosses, and was recently confirmed unanimously by our Senate Ag Committee. Please help me welcome Roberto to the stage.
Okay, I do have quite a few slides, so I'll be as quick and brief as possible. So I just want to thank CSU and also FCA for hosting this very important conversation. So I'm here really to kind of create a laboratory for how we can create better systems, ecosystems for our food and ag industries. And this is in an attempt to create and showcase the model between a year-round farm, Emerald Gardens, and East Denver Food Hub, leveraging private-public partnerships, resources, and some creative ingenuity in terms of creating markets and perhaps gleaning some innovative models on how capital and resources can flow to regenerate our local communities. So our farm is on the Eastern Plains. We occupy 35 acres, traditional land of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho people. And when my business partner, pictured here, and I stepped onto the land, we were literally facing a horizon that we didn't know where to begin. And just so happens that we both had an interest in hydroponic and controlled environment greenhouse operations, knowing that the land was completely depleted in organic matter, there was no infrastructure. We needed something quick and rapid to get up and running so that we could actually engage in the market and create a viable farming operation. That's one of the reasons why we chose to develop our operation in a passive solar greenhouse to mitigate the temperature swings and all of the challenges farming on the Eastern Plains, and it allowed us to really create a viable business that focuses on microgreen production. We're probably the only microgreen farmer on the Eastern Plains that is creating markets both wholesale and direct to consumer. We were thriving and really developing an opportunity to offer a crop that is quick growing, can be grown year round, uses very minimal water and inputs, and we use vertical farming to optimize the square footage of our production space. So as you can see, we grow 5 levels instead of a single plane as traditional greenhouses. And this is really something that we're trying to figure out as we begin leveraging the rest of the acreage. This pretty much encompasses only 3,000 square feet of the 35 acres that are available to us. So how can we do that to create land access opportunities, and really looking at the model that Kevin just talked about of Pooter Farms to see how we can develop a similar opportunity over there. And we all know that, you know, looking at the soil food web, this is one way that we can regenerate our soils. Part of the STAR program, how we can think about the carbon cycle to do this. I view this as another model in terms of how we can create a social food web. The organisms beneath our feet already figured out how to keep the ecosystem alive and thriving. How can we do that with our social systems? And so as much as we're trying to regenerate our soils, we're also trying to regenerate and create sustainable opportunities for our communities. This is also a model for me in terms of how we think about capital. We understand the importance of carbon sequestration. What does it mean to think about capital sequestration and keep that within our local communities and economies? And we were really blessed to work with the SLO opportunities for investing locally. The Soil Boulder Group really allowed Emerald Gardens to develop its foundation by creating a 0% loan that was $15,000 to cover our GAP certification so that we could work with major distributors and wholesalers, and also a very essential part of infrastructure on our farm, which was creating an access road as per the fire department requirements, which we couldn't get without their help. Now, Woody Tash, the founder, is launching Beatcoin, which is an opportunity to fund other soil groups around the country. East Denver Food Hub really arises out of the need to address the viability of local farms, mitigating the economic challenges due to COVID, but also addressing the increasing need for food security in our communities. East Denver Food Hub was an organization that I co-founded to really address those links together. As we're noticing that the economic destabilizing effects of supply chains, we realized that smaller local supply chains were far more resilient to getting food to people when they needed it the most. And so now we're championing the viability of local farmers, creating opportunities for BIPOC farmers to access land on Emerald Gardens Farm, and connecting them to markets in the community. Our ecosystem as a business really addresses the supply and the demand side by providing farmers with the services and resources, technical assistance that they need to develop their own operations, while also creating a hub-to-hub local food supply chain based on the values of cooperative development, community wealth building, and basically connecting farmers to their communities. We see this as an opportunity to create a market that will substantiate our new burgeoning group of farmers in our next generation of stewards. And so how do we do that in a manner that creates economic opportunity as well for other people in our communities? By leveraging the resources of our land. Sugar Moon Mushrooms was one of the farms that we launched due to the fact that East Denver Food Hub created partnerships with food access organizations. We got contracts, created opportunities to forward contract with the farmer, and thus create a foundation to launch a new business. Now we occupy 15,000 square feet of warehouse space where we're providing the services of aggregation and distribution and moving more into how we can develop processing and co-packing opportunities to support value-added producers such as Roy. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, panel. So we're going to move over to our panel part of the discussion. It's going to be a lightning round. So we're just going to move quick through some questions. And if you guys could just be real zippy, I think, what do you want the audience to leave with in the next, 5-10 minutes? They've heard about your business. They've heard about, the diversity of what you represent of Colorado Ag. And hopefully you see how incredible this panel is. So with that, let me move over to this mic. All right, for starters, all right, these are all on. You guys got mics down there as well. We're talking a lot about infrastructure, and I think, you mentioned this at the beginning, and I want to talk about, so Bob, maybe we can start with you. Infrastructure, brick and mortar, services. What about policy infrastructure, and how can we think about sort of the policy mechanisms at play to enable YBS, young beginning and small farmers, to have more opportunities in the field?
Yeah, I mean, from a policy perspective, I assume you're looking more for a broader scale. Obviously, from a local level, there are ways to incent people to come back, and it's not just brick and mortar investment, but that seems to be an easier way to go about it. I'll be honest, I mean, I'm no policy expert by any stretch, and as a project finance guy, I generally try to stay out of the policy arena. But anything that can be done to try to incent people to come back, I think is a benefit, especially as it relates to the rural piece.
Well, maybe I can, Roberto, get your perspective too, because I think, Bob, to your point, I mean, you had this incredible list of infrastructure, and the policy is part of that, but it's really about the services, the connection. And Roberto, you talked a lot about the hub and spoke and connecting different parts of the community. How do you think about infrastructure, and how does that support young and beginning farmers?
Well, I think the most important elements of infrastructure have to do with our social relationships and the opportunities that we can create together with institutions, for example, who are really providing a model of investing in critical infrastructure as anchor institutions. Kaiser Permanente, for example, in the East Bay, has actively invested in the local food system by providing cold storage opportunities and access points for farmers to aggregate their products. So I think developing this awareness of mutually supported initiatives that promote the well-being of our stewards on the farm, but also understanding that they're stewards of the community so that we can ensure food security, have to go hand in hand when we make decisions about where our capital investments are moving towards.
Excellent, thank you. Roy, you mentioned, a comment made earlier today, right? The more creative, the better, but you've had a different experience. Can you share us a story of, maybe somebody who took a risk on you, and what did that mean for your business? Or maybe a time where you wish they had taken a risk to allow you to do what you wanted to do?
We get our financing through a local community bank, and when I came back, I told Dad things that have to change because we were break-even farmers. And that's what most of agriculture is in the United States, is you hope to break even and have a good year once out every 5. And when I started making these changes, the first year we did significant change, my dad, we have a deal. I do the labor, he does the books. He didn't realize how bad he was going to get screwed in that deal, but he's learning now. But we sat down and he had me list all the crops and where are they selling and who, what kind of money and where did I get the idea that it would make that many pounds in Colorado, and just background information for himself while he was building the cash flow. And when he turned it into the bank, he included that in the back page. He just thought, well, it's just more information, whatever. And when the loan committee looked at the proposal, and at the time we were at 8 crops, they looked at it and said no. They voted it down because it was too risky. Because there's all these places that reminds them of an organic operation that they had financed that went belly up because it didn't have any marketing. And our loan officer was like, hold it, we have that information. So he went and he got that and he made a copy for the loan committee, and the loan committee went, oh, there's contracts for everything. Well, this is a no-brainer then. And they then supported us. And I'm happy to say that our banker is actually one of our biggest supporters. He comes out, he buys honey from us. He likes to know what's going on because of the different things that are happening. And he was willing to put it out there and support us when we're raising crops that we've been told literally do not grow in Colorado. Now, how that's evolved is our revenue has tripled, our expenses have doubled. We are not just a little profitable. And it makes a huge difference when a farmer can go into a year looking at it going, if I wanted to, we could live off of what this farm can do. We're not doing that. My wife has a really good job, so I don't need to. But it's having that banker support is huge for people that are wanting to risk and try different things.
So Kevin, over to you. I mean, you talked quite a bit about sort of the public-private partnerships that Poudre Valley relies on. Can you kind of give us maybe the highlights of what makes those partnerships successful from your vantage point?
Patience. You want more?
That was perfect lightning round right there.
These things fail because one party gets impatient, and it's usually the private partner gets impatient with the way municipalities have to work. And we've been politically astute in being patient and never talking badly about our partners at the city. And I think that has been the number one ingredient for success is we're good community partners, and we take the long view. And I think a municipality and city staff need a good, consistent partner in the community to work with, and it always, in my experience, gets tanked by people who are impatient and don't recognize the realities of what a government has to deal with in forming those partnerships.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, last question. Bob, I'm going to start with you and we'll move down the line. What is one thing you hope folks in this room take away to support more of what you'd like to see in rural communities across the country?
Just that you need to have a place to come back to and build it, and they will come.
All right,
Sorry,
Kevin.
can you repeat the question?
What is one thing you hope the audience takes away to make sure that rural Colorado looks the way you want it to look in the future?
For me, ranching equals conservation.
Great.
I think that we have to remember that the farmer is not out there by themselves. And it's our family that bears most of the strain and the stress. And so it's really important that we take care of the supporting cast members. And a lot of times I think they're forgotten. They're just kind of expected to do that.
I would say that I really encourage everyone to have an ecosystems understanding, to find innovative ways of solving challenges, but also very precise in the intersections of these challenges. For me, I think we're in a great opportunity with new Farm Bill coming up, access to about 400 million acres, and a generation of young stewards that have surmountable student loan debt, but who are really our next generational farmers. How do we begin to address their burdens so that they can continue the longevity of agriculture? If we're able to do that, then we might also think about how to get food to people where they need it the most and address food security so that we can regenerate our local economies in general.
All right, everybody. Well, I hope that leaves you with some excellent food for thought. Please join me in thanking our incredible panel here today. Thank you so much, everybody.